Everybody's talking about how the dollar is going to crash and how it's been losing massive amounts of purchasing power over the past 10 years.
Is the dollar on life support?
I think the answer is yes. The only question is when.
All the currencies are correlated to the dollar, and the dollar's collapsing.
But the experts aren't telling you the entire story about the United States dollar. And I'm going to explain this to you in one simple, fast step. Step number one, let's go over the reality of the situation. We can sit there and talk about what we think is happening, but we have to look at the data to come to accurate conclusions. We start with a chart going all the way back to 2007. On the left, we go from 70, 80, up to 110. Most of you will recognize this. It's the DXY, which is simply a measure of the dollar against a basket of other fiat currencies. Now, before you say, George, I get what you're saying here. The dollar's gone up, and that doesn't mean that the dollar's up against goods and services. The dollar's just going down at a slower rate than all the other fiat currencies. Okay, whoa, pump the brakes. We're going to get into that in just a moment. But before we do, hear me out. So back in 2006 or so, prior to the GFC, right around 80 goes up. During the GFC, it goes down. And then 2011, I really want to highlight this point in time. It's just after we were coming out of the GFC. And in my opinion, the monetary system really changed. So 2011, 2012 is what I use as a starting point. Now, if you're asking how did the monetary system change so significantly during the GFC, that's a topic for a completely separate video. But it has a lot to do with the amount of dollar-denominated debt and the use of collateral in the global monetary system. But moving on, the dollar goes way up after hitting the lows in 2011, 2012 to about 100. It stays in this range between 100 and maybe 90 until we get to the cerveza sickness, and then it rips higher, gets to a high about 110. In fact, it was probably even higher than that, maybe 112, maybe even 114. And then it's come down recently to about 100, hasn't really dipped below that. And then as of the last couple months, it shot back up to about 105, 106. But like the dollar bears point out, this is absolutely just a measurement of the dollar against other fiat currencies. So why does that matter? Because the narrative you're going to hear, and you can see this just by looking at my Twitter feed for about 30 seconds, is yes, George, but the dollar, George, here's what you don't understand about the United States dollar. Just imagine that you've got these skydivers that are flying in this plane, and all of them jump out at the same time. Well, the dollar skydiver just pulls his parachute the first, and all the other skydivers, like the euro, the yen, the British pound, etc., well, they're still falling. So it's not that the dollar isn't losing value, it's just that it's falling at a slower rate than everything else you're comparing it to. Another thing people love to say is, well, George, I get what you're saying here in this chart. It really doesn't matter because we all know the dollar is the cleanest shirt and the dirty hamper. But what people don't understand is these analogies are totally inaccurate when you zoom out and look at the entire world. And you don't just have this myopic view of the United States. And you may say, okay, George, why does this matter? Well, it absolutely does when you're thinking about this through the lens of the global reserve currency and, oh, by the way, demand for treasuries. More on that in just a moment. But getting back to this narrative, what we have to understand is it's not like the dollar is the cleanest shirt in the dirty hamper. The dollar is the cleanest shirt hanging up in your closet. And it's not like the dollar skydiver is falling at a slower rate. The dollar skydiver is still in the plane. In fact, in a lot of countries, the dollar is not only in the plane, but the plane is going higher and higher and higher. Let me show you what I'm referring to. What we really have to do is we have to first and foremost look at the USD relative to another local currency, and then what we have to determine is what the local inflation rate was during a specific time frame. And the time frame I'm going to use for the rest of this video, right around 2011 and 2012, for the reasons I stated before. Editor, let's cut right to the internet. Let's start by using a country like Brazil. So here are the inflation data going back to, say, 2012, 2022. This is a 10-year span. And I'm not trying to get super detailed on the numbers. I'm just trying to get a broad idea of what the average inflation rate was during this 10 years. Again, I'm not trying to be hyper specific on the numbers, taking them out to 3 or 4 decimal places. We're just doing this back of the napkin math so you understand the concept. So in 2012, we were right around 5.4, and 2015, we get up to 9. Then in 2018, we get down to 3.6, 2020, 3.21, and then we get up to 9.28. And like most of the world, they probably went through disinflation afterwards. But we can just use this as an overall idea as to what the average inflation rate was. We'll call it right around 6%. I think if you added all of these together and divided by 10, that's right about what you'd get. So then what we have to do is we have to figure out what the total inflation was during this time frame. Okay. So we just have to use a compound interest calculator. This just tells us the compounded number. It doesn't have to specifically be interest. So we start with we'll just say $100 to keep it easy. 12 years, because we're going from 2012 to 2024. And we'll put in just 6%. And what we get is $201. So what this tells us is prices in Brazil during this time have approximately gone up by 100%. So prices are twice as high today as they were in 2011 or 2012. Okay, easy enough. Now let's move on to the currency, the Brazilian real, and see what that has done relative to the United States dollar during the same time frame. So we go back to 2012 and we can see the real was right around, we'll call it 180 or 2 to the dollar. But where is it today? It's at 5.23. In other words, the dollar has increased in value relative to the real far more than the local inflation rate. So, what this means is if you're a Brazilian and you've been holding dollars over the last decade, your purchasing power has not gone down. Your purchasing power has gone up. In fact, it's gone way up. Let me just say that one more time because this is incredibly difficult for Americans to really get their head around. The dollar can be losing value against goods and services in the United States, which it absolutely has. Nobody is disputing that. While at the same time, the dollar can go way up in value, not just against a foreign currency, but against goods and services in that foreign country. So if you're a foreigner and you look at the dollar, it has absolutely, unequivocally been a store of value. You buy more or the same goods and services today as you did 10 or 12 years ago. And for the local Brazilian, that's all they care about. So now that you understand my super simple back of the napkin math, I want to point out it's not just Brazil where we see this phenomenon. In fact, in Japan, the dollar has gone up in value relative to local goods and services, which again is all the Japanese care about. Brazil, we talked about that. Colombia, it's gone up. Indonesia, it's gone up. Germany, pretty much flat. Italy, pretty much flat. Canada, it's gone up. The UK, flat to down slightly. India, flat. Now it is true, there are some countries like Mexico where the opposite has happened, where the dollar has definitely lost value relative to goods and services locally. But what we see for the majority of the countries around the world, the dollar has gained value going back to the GFC, which is very important because, again, that's when I think the monetary system changed in a way that brought about the results we've seen over the last 10 years when you look at the dollar relative to stuff in other countries. Now, I know a lot of you right about now are saying to yourself, okay, George, I kind of get what you're saying, but why does this even matter? I mean, I'm in the United States. Like you said, the dollar is going down in value here. So who cares what it's doing in Indonesia? Or who cares what it's doing in India or Colombia or Brazil at the end of the day? Well, here's why you should pay attention to this. Well, first of all, when you think about the probabilities of the dollar losing reserve currency status, you have to factor this into your analysis. Secondly, when you're sitting there asking yourself, well, what's going to happen to demand in the treasury market? Are we going to have this debt doom loop, if you will, where the long end of the treasury curve, the interest rates just go up and up and up and up and up because there's just no longer demand for these treasuries because the dollar is just losing value so quickly? Well, again, if you're doing a proper analysis of what the probabilities are that there's going to be foreign demand for treasuries moving forward, you have to consider exactly what the dollar is doing in these other countries and why it may incentivize these people to not only store their excess productivity in the United States dollar, but why not store it in the US dollar where you're being paid 5% interest? In other words, a treasury. And to help all of you watching this video understand really how the majority of foreigners see the United States dollar, I want to cut to a clip of my recent road trip all the way across Argentina, trying to use nothing but gold, silver, and Bitcoin. Editor, cut to the clip.
Here's the dollar. Gold. Gold. Yeah. This dollar. Yeah.
Dollar.
And I know right about now, all the gold guys are probably watching this video and just their heads are about ready to explode. And they're saying, George, how dare you? This is like Greta Thunberg. And they're saying, how can you measure things against the United States dollar? You can't do that. You've got to measure things against gold because gold at the end of the day is real money. Those green pieces of paper that you're dealing with, that's only currency. Okay, fair enough. Let's go to a quick clip from a video from a very, very good friend of mine, Mr. Mike Maloney, who actually goes over the properties of currency and money.
Currency is a medium of exchange, a unit of account. It is portable, durable, divisible, and something called fungible. Fungible means that each unit is the same as the next unit. A dollar in my pocket buys the same amount as a dollar in your pocket. Money is all of those things plus a store of value over a long period of time. Even financial planners, bankers, your accountant, they don't understand the difference between currency and money.
And you'll notice what was the very first thing on Mike's list? It was a medium of exchange. And I can tell you definitively, based on my trip across Argentina, gold is not a medium of exchange, nor is silver. So how can we consider it money based on Mike Maloney's definition of money itself? I don't think we can. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't own gold. I think everybody should own gold because it is a fantastic store of value. There is no doubting that. But we can't say that it's a medium of exchange because I would challenge you to try to go a week right now, wherever you live, and just exchange gold for goods or services. You're not going to get too far. In fact, at the end of the week, I can promise you, you're going to be very, very hungry and you're most likely not going to have a roof over your head. So my main point there is for the rest of the world, whether Americans like it or not, the dollar is money, including a store of value. And keep in mind, this is happening when the Fed's balance sheet is going from 800 billion all the way up to 9 trillion. And when M2 money supply in the United States has gone from about 9 trillion in 2011, 2012, all the way up to 20 trillion, an increase of over 100%. And the United States debt has gone from 14 trillion to over $34 trillion. This is an increase of $20 trillion, almost 150%. And let's not forget about the trade deficit. It's gone from about 40 billion to where it is today, $68 billion per month. And during the cerveza sickness, it got as bad as $100 billion. That means every single month, right now, there's about $60 billion that are leaving the United States, an additional $60 billion leaving the United States and circulating in the global economy. And what's mind-blowing about that is if you actually go to these other countries, you see that as counterintuitive as this may be, the dollar is actually scarce. In fact, in Argentina, they hoard dollars. It's Gresham's law, but not with Bitcoin or gold, with USD. Whoa, time out. I know a lot of you right about now are saying, George, this is just temporary because Russia, the BRICS countries, they're going to come out with their own gold-backed currency, and that's going to be the ultimate store of value, medium of exchange, money. Because this dollar may be okay temporarily, but at the end of the day, it's fiat currency. It isn't backed by anything. Well, we'll have to see how it plays out. Again, they're only probabilities. There are no certainties. But what I would remind you is to be very cautious about being overly optimistic about a gold-backed BRICS currency. Why? Because when I drove all the way across Argentina, nobody wanted gold. And if they would buy it, I'd have to take about a 50% haircut. So if nobody out in the real world outside of the United States or the developed economies want gold to begin with, I don't know why they would want a gold-backed currency where your counterparty was Vladimir Putin. Now let me be very clear. I am not saying that the dollar is going to remain a fantastic store of value or it's going to remain the global reserve currency forever, for hundreds of years into the future. But what I am saying is the probability is very high based on what we've discussed in this video until the monetary system changes. For more content that'll help you build wealth and thrive in a world of out-of-control central banks and big governments, check out this playlist right here. I will see you on the next video.